Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 200 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game. Are you ready to discover what your Knack for Business truly is?
Today's topic is moving the right needle to fast growth. Your hosts Bernie Fransford from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc. So, what can you expect from the Knack for Business podcast? The aim is to help you find your feet in the business world, whether you're just starting out or you've been at it for a while. We have something for everyone. In each episode, they dive deep into a particular area of business and explore the ins and outs of that subject. They interview guests that are experts in the field. We share their success stories and their experiences. They offer practical tips and advice. Our guest today is Greg Ward from the Ward Law Group. Greg is the founder and managing partner of the Ward Law Group, one of South Florida's largest car accident law firms. With over 20 years of experience, Greg is a seasoned courtroom lawyer and negotiator dedicated to helping car accident victims, particularly within the Hispanic community, receive the compensation they deserve. Together with his wife and co-founder, Danny Martinez Ward, Greg has built a firm that tailors legal services to Spanish speakers, ensuring that they have representation from a team that understands their language and their stories. His unique background working for insurance companies gives him an inside edge in handling complex cases, leading from a small two-person team to over 200 members, all committed to providing exceptional service to underserved communities. Greg, welcome. Do you have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
I do. My favorite quote is from the Bible. It's Jesus in Matthew chapter, in which he says, "Truly I tell you, you have faith and do not doubt. Not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer." I love to start with a Bible quote. I think that goes into my favorite business quote, which is Napoleon Hill: "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." If you really think about those two quotes, you'll see they're pretty interrelated, and I think it's pretty essential to understanding my story, the interaction between those two quotes, and basically, applied faith in business, starting from a spiritual perspective, has been very fundamental for us.
So you were in the insurance industry and now you drift over into the law. How did that all come about for you?
I love the use of the word origin story. I think all of us have an origin story, right? Comic books resonate with young men because it's a stories that we want to emulate ourselves. We start off and we have our challenges we overcome. It makes us into the person we are, hopefully the superhero we are, getting the great results that are superhuman. If you look at any great literature, you see the same thing, the hero's journey. And so when you talk about origin story, I always talk to my people in hiring and coaching, what is your origin story? I grew up in Baltimore, a lower middle class, upper lower class neighborhood. Was, kind of a smart, geeky kid who just didn't fit in very well. The Spider-Man story, get bullied, picked on. I wasn't as smart as Peter Parker, but I was nerdy and had weird hair and all that. I just never felt like I fit in. Instead of becoming antisocial, I decided to try and grow myself and set out to do something better. I also wanted to stand up for kids who got picked on a lot. I got bullied. Kids around me got bullied. And so I always would stand up for the kids who got bullied. And as you think about your origin story in your life, know your origin story, right? Know what it is you stand for. It's impossible to see what meaning you want to bring out of your life, the dent you want to make in the universe, if you don't know where you come from. Because where you come from can really give you some clues as to what your ultimate purpose is. And so for me, standing up for the little guy was part of my DNA at a very young age. Even when it was not in my best interest to stand up for the little guy, I got beat up a lot, but it taught me that standing up for people is the right thing to do. I guess I was a little knucklehead. I took the wrong lesson. I should have just stopped, right? But I didn't. I said, I want to stand up for people. But that was coupled with I want to have a good life for my family, and I grew up in somewhat poverty. Going the law route was the way that I went, and I wanted to get job security, so I went and worked for the insurance industries in a large law firm to start my career because that job security kind of weighed heavily. Then there was an evolution after that.
Well, you started out with a two-person team and now you're over 200 members. How fast was that growth?
We're 12 years in on this venture. I had a couple of law firms before this, a car dealership and a property management company. This enterprise started with my wife and myself with a fold-out table, a laptop computer, and a cell phone. And that was basic, and $400 in debt. That's another thing I'm proud of, that I basically sleeping on a couch. I had nowhere to go but up. So from that perspective we made over $80 million last year in 12 years. That's rocket fast. But at the same time, it does seem like it's been an organic evolution. We've definitely hit each stage of business development. When I say that, you'll find your audience, if they've been in business for a while, there are plateaus in every business. It's usually at about 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 25 million, 50 million. I'm at the $80 to $100 million plateau right now. You'll bust through it, stay that way for a year, and then grow really fast, like it's surging at various points. Each of those stages carries a set of tasks to overcome or quests to get to the next level. It seems fast in some ways, but in other ways, it also seems slow, because I could see us on a track to 250 or a million or even a billion, but we got to make those incremental steps.
Was your ascent into this space mostly mapped out, or is it more, hey, this is working well, we've found the secret formula, and all of a sudden it started to boom and go forward?
Yeah, a little of both. But when we were 465,000 in debt and there was just a laptop computer, I had a spiritual conversion. I became a born again Christian at that moment in time. I had a lot of things going wrong in my life. I was just in a hole. And at that moment, I realized I was chasing money. I had other businesses, and I wanted a rock star lifestyle, all the traveling success. When I realized that was not a meaningful pursuit, that's when the switch changed for me, and I started pursuing this. To answer your question, my wife came up with the idea to do the car accidents because she's a Spanish speaker, came across the border at 14 here to the United States, became a lawyer. And I told her, you go do your car accident thing. I was a big time lawyer practicing for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I said, you go do that, and I'm going to do this other thing. She started having success. I was doing my thing and she was doing her thing, and she got even to me, and I'd been practicing for 10 or 15 years, and that she's been practicing for 1 year, and she's the same where I was for 15 years. I said, wait a minute, I think I'm doing something wrong here. So I started looking at her business and realized that she would top out right where we were at if we didn't think about scaling it. I had a lot of experience studying business and fancying myself as a serial entrepreneur. I started taking some of those lessons and applying it to the marketing engine that she had, and that's when it really exploded. I gave up my practice and we worked together hand in hand. It was essential for me to abandon what I had done before and focus on just growing and running the business, which is what I do now. And I do a lot of real estate now too, by the way. I've gotten back into the entrepreneur thing, but specifically where that turning point was where I said, you know what, this business has legs and it just needs infrastructure scaling, systems and processes, right hiring went along, and we did that over the next 10 years. And now we're still growing. We still have a lot of growth ahead of us.
We hear the term moving the needle to make things work. And sometimes you can turn all the dials and it's, yeah, that's not helping. Which needles did you focus on specifically? I think you touched on when you noticed your wife all of a sudden starting to be at the same level as you for capacity, for results. What other needles did you find that were key to help move things forward for you?
There's a really great accounting consultant named Keith Cunningham. So one of the needles is an anti-needle. Don't pay the stupid tax. Don't make the same mistake twice. The second time you make that mistake, that's called the stupid tax. And I've gotten very good at avoiding the stupid tax, but you were going to make a ton of mistakes. And then when you make those mistakes, use that as feedback and don't make those mistakes again. Test everything. So you find with a lot of entrepreneurs, they either get so wedded to their project. What Napoleon Hill says in his book, Think and Grow Rich, 3 Feet from Gold, he says, don't give up, but he also says, talk to people who know so you see if your concept is true. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they have such a passion, but they don't have that feedback and they're not willing to adjust. One thing that hugely moved the needles for us is we tested everything that we could. I invented metrics to get data. People still tell me to this day, you can't get your ROI for advertising from various market segments. I may not be able to get the exact, but I can get a proxy that's good enough for me to make educated decisions. So test everything. If any vendor comes into you and says, we can't really track these results, do not hire that vendor. Every vendor who is going to be useful is going to be accountable to you, and they're going to show, great vendors will show you, not only will I be accountable to you, I'm going to tell you the last 10 people I was accountable to and get their references. And that's what a great vendor does. Somebody's providing services for you. So Number one, track everything. If you can't track it, come up with a way to track it. When you see what works, double down in that. You got to pursue that strategy relentlessly. And that's what we did. So our first radio station we went on, and I saw that it worked. We had to reach a certain tipping point of investment. But once we crossed that threshold, we started getting a really good ROI. And I kept increasing the budget until it plateaued. And then I stopped. I stopped increasing the budget. Now, there are times like maybe there's a soccer game on or something, I'll increase the budget a little bit. But otherwise, I'm like, that's my great marginal return right there. I've topped out, and then I start looking for the next station and how I can test the next station. And we did that organically with 15 different media outlets. And now we've got what I think is a really good system with our media outlets. And we're big enough where we can dictate some of the terms of those contracts. People get into a business, think it's going to work intuitively. They don't test it and they don't get feedback, then they get sunk or make the same mistake a couple times. They may mess up on one outlet and then they'll do the same mistakes in the second outlet. You got to get smarter. You've got to improve. And that's the journey. There's a lot of setbacks on the way to 100 million. And if you don't pass those tests, you're going to be stuck right there. So moving the needle, I would say definitely getting feedback, inventing the metrics, following the data, and don't pay the stupid tax. There's a whole bunch of other things. You can get in a mastermind group. You can do a lot of other things. But I would say those things at the very beginning when cash was super tight, that's what we did. And that got us up to that first $1 million to $2.5 million in revenue that was critical.
I know that you also help serve underserviced communities, in this case, the Hispanic one, as an example. Has that kind of like a niche you've identified? Everybody experiences misfortune, and whether it's due to their own hand, someone else's, or whether it's truly accidental or through negligence or whatever the means are. But is this, you found a niche that would have a good yield and at the same time also be supportive of the community that you're servicing? Is that another key, another needle to the
Yeah,
process?
you have to be passionate about the service you're providing.
Mhm.
Remember I told you in high school that I don't like bullies. So I wanted to serve people who were getting bullied, and insurance companies have a lot of money and they can bully people if you're not protected. Secondly, my wife was an immigrant. She was always uncertain about her legal rights when she came here, and it was overwhelming for her, and she was very poor. Combining a very large multinational insurance company that has all the resources in the world with the most vulnerable group in our society is a recipe that both my wife and I were passionately committed to helping. That brings us to our first core value. You have to know what you stand for. I bleed for my clients. Service to my clients is my number one core value. It's number one core value for all of my people. I look for a commitment to serving someone in people's lives as the most important criteria I use to hire somebody. These people are very unfortunate, are vulnerable, and we've got to stand up and use all of our talent and abilities for them. That's core value number one. Core value number two I look for is service to the team, which they have to support each other. My team has to support each other. And then the third thing you touched on, which is service to the community. I do believe that we need to give back to our communities. I think most business people, they've got to figure out what their core values are and actually articulate them. If you have a team of 5 people, you can sit down and in 3 hours, well, I'll tell you how we did it. We sat down with a whiteboard. We wrote down every core value you could imagine. What do you think we stand for? We had 98 examples, and then we consolidated, stripped, cut, edited, refined, and tweaked the language. Came up with 7. The first 3 are the ones we really drive on, which is service to the client, service to the team, and service to the community. And I use that in every area of my business to make sure we're delivering that. And they've got to be passionate about it. I'm always looking for people who are passionate about serving others. As a CEO, it's my DNA. It's an extension of me. That gives me the fuel I need, because there's some days I do want to stay in bed, or other days I just, once you get enough money you can retire on, it's like the money's not enough. So you've got to have something that gets you out of bed. Those core values are what keep me coming back, even when I get punched in the face sometimes.
Having that core motivation, that's key. It's something internal, not an external reward. You had your experience inside the insurance company, which gave you insights how the system works.
Mm-hmm.
And now you started the legal practice, and now you're growing. And how do you maintain? Because if you're a craftsman, craftswoman, whatever the case might be, if you build your first piece of art, right? Now you want to replicate it 300 times. All of a sudden, like, I can't do this by hand, et cetera. So in your case, it's not a machine, it's another person. How do you maintain that same level? Maybe you found a really great employee and all of a sudden, like, they go, wow, this is a
better.
new level, which is also an opportunity. But how do you build that in? How do you maintain that? So you're getting what you want as a result. Your clients are getting the best results.
So my backstop for this is, are my settlements increasing? Are they going up? That's how I'm sure that over this, because we have a large enough inventory where I can predict data and I can say, okay, if I get $1,000 more per case this year, for example, then we're providing better service, at least in the areas that matter. That is my personal bright line backstop, that if for some reason it started going down without any other issues impacting the settlements, I think we wouldn't be providing as good a service. The second metric that I use is client satisfaction, rates of discharge, because they can say they're happy, but if I get fired more throughout the year, that's another issue. Now, there's other explanations for that, but those are some data points that I'm looking at to make sure we're providing the best service. You tapped on some interesting points with this, because there are various stages of corporate development. When it's 1 to 10 people, you're going to be working off of checklists. And then that evolves. It evolves into systems and processes. We've spent millions of dollars in our software to make sure that everyone is asking the same questions and investigating in the same way, hopefully comprehensively, and maybe not too narrowly, because when you get too rigid, it can break, right? You see this in COVID. If supply chains are very rigid, it's great for efficiency. But then when one little thing goes wrong, the entire supply chain breaks. Same thing in any business. The more efficient you become, the less flexibility you have in your organization. And so you run the risk of breaking, or sometimes over focusing on some things, and you've got to correct the machine a little bit. You've got to have a balance between systems and processes. And the human factor gives people the ability to look at how to bring value to the situation. That's an evolution. When you start off, the first step of evolution is checklists. Second step is basic processes, write them down, document them, train on them. At our stage now, we've got a training platform, we've got audits, and you have to do that, because it would be great if everybody just did their job, but things come up, people forget what they know, have personal issues at home, or didn't sleep the night before. So you've got to audit constantly to make sure that you're always moving it in the right direction and everyone's getting the best service possible.
One thing I remember from the corporate world was that here's the policy and procedure. This is it. And I also know from a law enforcement perspective, there's the law and then there's order, and they're not necessarily hand in hand. It means you're providing order. Yeah, you shouldn't have done that, but this is the best outcome. Do you find that, from a work perspective, that you have that sometimes, you know what, this was our best practice, but there's a one instance, one off moment, or it might be an evolution. Do you find that happening also as you go forward?
Well, it's interesting you raised those examples, because I want to answer your question.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was a great question, and where my brain went when you were asking this question is, you have to balance the processes against the core values, right? This is a great example between Southwest Airlines and a lot of other airlines. Southwest Airlines has a very small operating handbook on customer service. The people are empowered to help people, guided by these principles about great customer service. They don't need a giant operations manual. I always tell my people, look, the core values are always the most important thing if we're giving good service to the client. If you have a procedure that is harming a client, you have the power to do what's right by the client. But tell me what it is so I can figure out if there's a problem with the procedure or not, right? You got to feed it up the chain. So if this happens, we can see, if, as you say, is it a pattern, or is it just something where there's a very unique situation that the manual doesn't apply to? This may be one of these controversial topics. I'm from Miami. I'm in New York now, but I'm from Miami. We had that unfortunate event with the Miami Police Department, with the Miami Dolphins player. While the police officers were correct in that if they followed their procedures, they were right to pull him out of the car, there's also procedures that say you should de-escalate. If you've got a $350,000 McLaren, it was probably not going to be carrying a gun and shoot you, and he's a football player, maybe you don't want to make a spectacle of this guy in the middle of the road, and that's de-escalation. I think there was an opportunity to de-escalate and maybe train the officers better in this situation. I understand there's one officer who was particularly aggressive. Let's de-escalate a little bit. I get clients who go crazy all the time. They get really upset. They're hurting. They've lost their job. They're going to lose their home. And they hire me to fix that problem. And I can only do what I can do. I've got to manage this. My people have to manage these very intense situations where there's a lot on the line. They're counting on us, and we make promises to them that we're going to help them through the situation. So we've got to be very sympathetic and try and always de-escalate. And if you're trying to do your best for the client and you will go outside of a procedure, I'm going to cut you some slack. But what I do find more often is people just don't want to follow the procedure, so they'll make excuses, and then you got to deal with that. That's the other side of this equation. So it's a balance, man. It's a balance.
You were mentioning earlier that when people are in time of stress, the clarity of thought and next steps, the chess game is not in play. It's the
Right.
immediate thing. But the other thing I noticed that when people are under extreme stress, they revert back to their mother tongue. The next thing you're looking at a person and going, I do not understand what's happening here.
We've gotten to a point now where we don't have we used to be 100% multilingual or bilingual. We've gotten to a point now where we're probably 80%, maybe 90%. It was purely because I couldn't find enough attorneys who were bilingual. But as far as support staff, all of my support staff is bilingual because they have to be able to translate for the attorneys as well. But all that to say, I believe one of the service of the clients is to be able to speak to them in their native tongue. I think that's important. I put a billboard up in Orlando that said, "We speak your language in Spanish." And I got a hate call on my 800 number saying, "This is America, we speak English here." I just disagree. I think United States spoke English. I was a history major. I'm Irish, German. We sort of white people, I guess. We've done very well here. But I think we're big enough to be able to welcome other languages here. And that is one of the beautiful things about the United States is we are a country of immigrants and a melting pot. And if I can provide a niche service by having somebody who speaks somebody's language, I'll respect that. I raised my children speaking Spanish. It's their heritage. My wife is first generation here. My kids, I didn't speak English to them for the first 3 years, so they would get Spanish, and they now speak Spanish fluently. I think that's important. I want to honor their heritage too. I'm not threatened. I think a lot of the political issues around immigration and things are because people are a little scared. They're people they don't know. I always was drawn to immigrants. Can you imagine if you have to leave your home country because you're worried your daughters are going to get raped, to come here and give up everything you own, to just try and come here and clean toilets? I can't fault that. I've got one guy in my office we've actually sponsored him and he's getting his green card. He came because he had kids and they were going to get raped. I'm never going to be faulting that guy. Now, don't send a thug in here, a gang member. Yeah, lock them up, ship them back, whatever it is. But I got to tell you that the vast majority of immigrants are good, honest people who may look different than us and may sound different. But if you drill down, they want the same things for their family that we want for our families. I think it's to have the guts to come to another country. Those people deserve respect, even if they're not educated, even if they're not wealthy. I think they deserve respect, and that's why I'm so passionate about serving them because I know my wife. She came here with the same hopes. She would have been really messed up in Cuba if she had to stay there, and she's grateful to be here. And she's worked very hard to make this country a better place too.
You're taking a risk. You're taking a gamble, and your family is not typically nearby as a safety net. Right?
Mm-hmm. No net, no nothing. That's the ultimate courage, I think, to try and find a better life for yourself. And so I hate that immigrants are a political football in our country. There is some truth to it because there are some bad people coming, but it is much more of a political issue than it is reality. I think we could deal with the people who are the lawbreakers if we really wanted to. And I don't think it's in anybody's incentive to really deal with it until they get in their political power that they want to get. Because I don't see meaningful solutions coming forward on either side. I think both sides are messing this up. So it pains me because I know there are innocent people who are suffering, and that hurts my heart.
Coming as a new person to the country is one thing, but starting a business is equally as, oh my gosh, what was I thinking when I did that? It started in a bar with a napkin, and next thing I'm in the middle of this, and I owe a lot of money, and there's some uncertainty. From a financial point of view, what advice would you give to businesses other than A/B testing? Right? That worked, right? That didn't work. Stop that. We'll do that again. What other advice can you give a business owner who's ramping up their business?
Yeah, I go back to my first quote, have faith. You got to have faith. The business is a spiritual game. Let me say that again. Business is a spiritual game. There's nothing that has stretched and developed my spiritual strength more than starting, growing, and running a business. It is 100% spiritual. It is mental. It just requires everything you've got. It's probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. And it's also the most rewarding, not because of the finances. The finances have come. And if you're a great CEO of a large company, you'll see that the money is not the goal. The money is the result of moving a lot of levers and needles properly, then you get the money. That's how it works. If you want to say, I want to make $1 million, I can show you how to make $1 million in probably 2 years. But that's really not a meaningful goal that's going to get you out of the bed in the mornings. So I think it's useful. So advice to business people who are stretching themselves, have faith. Obviously, don't pay the stupid tax, because that's where the $1 million will go if you're not careful. And have an idea. Other business ideas, begin with the end in mind. What ultimately do you want to do? Where do you want to be? What's your exit going to be? Law firms are a little tricky with that because we can't sell our firm. So we got to have a better exit strategy. But know where you want to get and take inventory. Everything is not as bad as it seems. I've had 2 black swan events in my firm, really 3. I was reading an article just about AI. AI outperforms most CEOs. This is an article they did in the Harvard Business Journal the other day. AI can outperform most CEOs except with black swan events. And that's where the real CEO comes in. In those black swan events, it's like, now the cards are down. Are you going to do this, or are you going to shut it down? In those moments, you don't want to be reactive. You want to know why you're doing this. And I always go back to my Bible again. God did not bring me this far to shut me down now. So it's always forward for me. Because I look back on all the miracles that I had on the way here, and there's a lot of freaking miracles between there and here. And I just say, you know what? God isn't shutting me down. He wants me to keep going. That faith is what gets me through those hard times. Faith is a muscle. You've got to go through the stretch thin, no finances. Oh my gosh, I'm overextended. COVID has shut down all vehicle traffic in South Florida, and I've got a massive payroll with 100 employees, and there's no end in sight. We opened up pretty quickly, and I only had a 3-month downturn, but other things balanced out really well. They had a law change in Florida that could have really upended our practice, and it didn't. I had a health issue with my eye. Those are my 3 black swan events. I got depressed. I had a retinal detachment, and I was stuck in a chair or a face down massage table for 3 months. I got real depressed because I could have cashed out at that moment, and I decided to come back. If it was just about the money, I would not have gotten through any of those 3 things. But I feel like I'm on a spiritual quest right now. My journey doesn't end with COVID. My journey doesn't end with a law change. My journey doesn't end with a health issue. My journey ends when God says it ends, and he's going to tell me pretty clearly it's time to do something else. And I say that to some of the entrepreneur brothers out there. The other companies I had, they wrecked. I don't think I lost that much money on them, not in the end. But without having those wrecks, I wouldn't have learned the lessons I know now. So I'm paid for an education. I got a Harvard MBA by trying to run a couple of businesses and failing. That was a couple $100,000 for an MBA.
So it'd be fair to say a black swan event, just for our listeners, would be an event that was unplanned for and catastrophic, but you still have the ability to come back.
If you're a man of faith like I am, the implicit in the black swan event is it has the possibility to shut you down, right? To wreck you. It does have the possibility to destroy you. I'm not a big one about planning for black swan events because it's really hard to figure out what's that 1% that's going to come. I can tell you if you're a guy over the age of 60, your health is something you need to be worried about as a black swan event. I'm doing everything I can to maximize my health right now. I got a team of doctors and full body MRIs, stress tests, my annual physical at Mayo every year, all of that stuff. Because that's a potential black swan for me. I think if you are over leveraged and have a lot of credit lines, a black swan event could be a financial collapse or something like that. Doesn't seem like we're going to have it, but you could have something like what happened back in the late 2008, 2009 financial crisis. Credit could really tighten up. Those are all things that could be really bad. I'm highly dependent on the legal system. I'm diversifying geographically, but yeah, we have a law change. Some of my friends in other areas got their whole practice wiped out when Florida reformed the insurance code. Interestingly, the purpose of the reforms of insurance code were to lower property premiums. They've eliminated a lot of the rights that people had and have not lowered insurance. So it's definitely another political issue. I told you I'm controversial. I get pretty hot on a couple sides of the issues.
Yeah, the insurance company is a good barometer of risk tolerance. And if you're having a riskier space, whether it's bad weather or silly people doing silly things, they'll charge more for that risk. And that's your barometer, right? That's your hard reality. Go ahead.
No, I think insurance, you did ask me a question earlier about insurance. Business people, get insurance for what you can get insurance for because it does help you sleep at night. I have insurance for a lot of different issues. I have my insurance or EPLI. I have my D&O insurance. I have my general liability policies for all the buildings I own. don't cheap out on insurance. It really is not worth it because, that it will help you. Fortunately, I haven't had any claims. If I did, it does help me to sleep at night that I know that it's there if something really bad happens. That's a way to hedge against some black swan events, for example. I've got a lot of life insurance too, by the way. So that if something happens to me, key man, my family's taken care of. Don't cheap out on insurance. As much as I've groused, insurance companies by and large are good. They do pay the claims. It's just worth it to have the insurance. So, and that's a question you would ask me on a separate sheet that I wanted to mention, because entrepreneurs tend to cheap out on insurance, legal services. They don't like to hire lawyers, accounting services. Pay the man, pay the accountant, pay the lawyer, do what they say. It will save you in the long run.
I've had another person that he's an accountant, and he goes, "Oh, you don't have to use my services, but here in Canada, it's called CRA, your version of IRS." They come knocking, and if you really follow it up, it's not so much the fact they're knocking on your door; they already assumed you're guilty, and they're just looking for their money now, and pay the ferryman, so to speak.
I have my accountant because he takes care of that. If there's an issue, call Dan. He's going to take care of the issue. And if I got to write a check, I got to write a check. By the way, here's another axiom. If you can write a check to solve the problem, it's not really a problem. Problems are things that you need something outside of your range of options to solve. A health issue, some sort of crisis that you don't know how to get through, a hiring issue, those are problems. If you can write a check, it's annoying, but it's not. If you have the money in your bank account is what I'm saying. Not if you
Yeah.
can, not the check transaction, but if you have the money to cover the issue, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it like a problem. Then you can figure out what other options are, but you have one solution to that problem. That helps me sleep at night too. I've got a guy, I had to file a lawsuit myself against somebody. I am very litigation averse. Funny enough, I'm a lawyer, but I don't like to go to court. The guy is the worst. I've done so many projects and I've never had to sue anybody. And this one guy is just awful. Had to file a lawsuit. I begged his lawyer 6 times before I filed the lawsuit. Please, let's work this out. And the only way to work it out was to continue to pay him for work he wasn't doing. And I said, that's not a solution for me. So I'm going to sue you and you're going to have to pay me back or go bankrupt, one or the other. I'm sorry. And I don't want to do it, but I don't want to have to deal with that anymore. I'm going to get somebody in my office to deal with it so I don't have to. It stresses me out. But those are all things as an entrepreneur, you got to focus on what you do best, the highest and best use. And there's a cost of doing business too. And that's part of it.
You got to run into the odd soul that they're a learning curve, but too bad you couldn't filter them out ahead of time.
Yeah, he came with recommendations and I was going too fast. When I say stupid tax, now I look back and I say, where did I go wrong with this guy? I didn't dig deep enough on the references. I didn't hold him enough to the contract earlier. There's other things I should have done. And I'll do that next time. But right now, I'm just trying to get myself out of this sticky situation because I've spent a lot of money and got nothing in return. So let me see what I can mitigate on the back end of this thing.
So I guess this kind of folds back into like common mistakes some businesses will make, right? Don't go too fast. Due diligence is usually the key. I'm involved in another podcast that works on commercial real estate. You're investing in that space, right? Make sure there's no hidden bodies, so to speak. And I use that figuratively, not actually looking for the remains of other people there, but an oil tank that shouldn't be there. Are there
Yeah.
other mistakes that sometimes people that you've seen in business, skipping the insurance, skipping the accountant,
Yeah.
skipping legal, key factors crop up?
There's a Bible verse that says, do not yoke yourself unequally. A lot of times you'll get a sweat equity guy and a money guy. They're not 100% aligned in the purpose of the business, and they're not clear the expectation at the beginning, and they under document the relationship and the understanding of what they're going to be working on, the rights and responsibilities, and the ultimate exit of the business. Usually this is his baby. The money guy is just looking for a return. And I've been the money guy before. I've probably been the sweat equity guy too, but the ones I'm thinking of where I lost money, I was a money guy. I remember after a year, I was running this property management company or investing in it. And I said, when are we going to turn a profit? And we had great revenue, but no profit. I said, when are we going to turn a profit? Like, we have a lot of unnecessary expenses. And the sweat equity person was like, oh, it's insulting you're even asking that. I'm like, we've got plenty of revenue. We should be turning a small profit. And ultimately, I found out there was some intense negotiations at the closure of that company because she was using the company for her own stuff and not doing what we should be doing because I wanted to get more money out of the company. But that happens with people because you don't have an understanding. My wife and I are married. When the company goes up, we both go up. The company goes down, we both go down. We are 100% aligned. She does all the marketing. I do the systems and processes. It's a great partnership. A lot of times people, because they want to rush into their business, look for a money person. They've got the business baby. They get the money guy, or the money guy just looking to invest in something. I know a friend of mine, he had a staffing company. He had his brother-in-law as an investor, and it was great at the beginning. He got off the ground with a loan from his brother-in-law. The company sold for $20-30 million, and the guy had to stroke a check for 25%, and he was pissed because he's like, I should have just taken a loan from the bank. There were 9 times out of 10, your business was going to fail. Is it really a bad investment? Know what you're getting into, who you're getting into business with. It's hard because you're in the romance phase of a new business. I got this new business idea. Take a step back, take a deep breath, take a cold shower, think it through. Every time you find yourself getting too excited about it, jump in a cold shower, do a cold plunge, because that cold plunge is better at the front end than 2 years in when you're $500,000 in debt. You've got to make some tough decisions. So don't yoke yourself unequally. Make sure you know exactly what you want out of the business, and have a great written plan and stick to it. If things change, communicate right away when your things are changing. Don't wait. Like, for example, you have an illness in your family, sweat equity guy can't work as much. Tell your partners. Don't try and hide it, because that stuff is you lose trust, and then it's going to go downhill from there. So those are all mistakes that I've seen people make, or I've made.
Do you ever find that you ended up seeking advice from a neutral third party? In other words, not necessarily a competitor, to be another lawyer, or there's a Yoda in your life, so to speak. Was there that type of mentor?
I've got about 30 Yodas in my life. I pay about half of them, and I call them coaches. I find the very best person in a particular segment. I've got a hiring guy. I've got a scaling guy. I've got a guy who is business structures, right? He coaches me and my team. The scaling guy coaches me and my team. The hiring guy coaches me and my HR staff. I have lawyers who I rely on for things. It's easy now because I can pay these people, but I'm always the sounding board guy. Your first sounding board should be, I have a group of managers in my office. There's about 13, 14 of them. I beg them to give me their honest opinions. I test people in the interview process. If they will tell me I'm wrong, I say something that's just wrong, and I see if they will call me out, because I need that feedback. I need them to be able to say, okay, we made the decision. Now, Greg, move on when they're working with me. You mentioned entrepreneurs believe they're the best at every facet of their business. Absolutely not true. Stop it. Go jump in that cold water. You are not the best in every facet of your business. You have the vision for what you want. You have the faith, and you have the passion. Find people who are better than you in every other area of your life. I thought I was the best negotiator in my firm. Then I met my wife, and she crushes me in negotiations. And then I met another person who crushes my wife in negotiations. I'm a lawyer with 25 years of experience. I've negotiated a lot of complicated stuff. By the way, we met somebody else who got trained, and she's even better than her trainer. When I went to the car dealership the other day, my wife eviscerated these people. I feel like they paid us to take the car out. Like, it was crazy. And my point about this is, I'm a 25-year lawyer. I have a giant ego. I'm not the best negotiator in my firm, by far. You're not the best anything in your firm. Not the best salesperson, not the best whatever. You got the vision, you got the drive, the passion. That's what you're good at. And maybe you have one other skill set, right? Like, I can build systems and processes, and I'm still not even the best in my company at that. I got somebody who's better than me. But I can see if they were going to work or not. I see the problems. Get out of your own way. As soon as you can, for key positions, hire somebody who's better than you. You cannot scale if it's all on you. You got to find people better than you, hire them, and let them do the job. Get out of their way. Entrepreneurs are stubborn. Let them do their job. That was a jump over 10 million when I did that. And it was another giant revenue jump because I got out of everybody's way.
What was the tell? There's a dollar value tell. What was the light bulb moment for you when you realized, oh, I'm having that A/B test and I keep hitting the wrong answer? What was the clue, or what should people look for as a clue?
When you say what, about finding somebody better than them?
No, it's more what should hire someone to do HR. If you're at a certain size, you'll have someone who does finance, someone who does marketing. Each element will start to, it's like scope creep, right?
Yep.
Things will get to a certain point, like, this isn't working out so well. What do you use as a flag to say, time to spin it up and add more?
Yeah, up to 10 people, you're going to be involved in every facet of the company. Over 10 people, you really got to start thinking about, what can I spin off completely? And by completely, have a manager that reports to you, and you don't have all those people reporting to you. As far as our system, the way we did it, we got to a point about 10 people. We hired an office manager. Everybody reported to the office manager. And then we started segmenting the production divisions. We broke off marketing, and that's grown. We broke off our sign-up department, our sales department, our accounting department. That's the progression that we had, and then in that order. But it's for each and every business as individual. But you just got to look. I I don't believe in hiring somebody to a crisis, like, oh, I got this problem, I got to hire somebody to fix it. No, work out the solution, work out the plan, work out the process, and then hire somebody to fill that position. If you just hire somebody because you're feeling like you're short staffed, it's not going to solve the problem because they're going to come in with no direction. You've got to work out your plan, have the job description, the job KPIs, all that set, and then you hire into that position. But you already know what the solution you want is, and you can hire a person that fits that mold. A lot of entrepreneurs mistake. They're like, I need somebody to cover marketing. And so they get somebody with a generally a marketing background, but they have no, I'm not a marketer, right? I have a mind for scaling, but I don't have a mind for marketing. I have a mind for testing, but I don't have a mind for marketing. I can't come up with the creative stuff. I can come up with a funny line. That's it. So I don't want to be doing that. When I realize that I'm not the best at it, I need to hire somebody who's got a marketing background and a marketing skill. They are going to be different personalities than me. And another big mistake, don't hire people who are like you. Do not hire people who are like you. Test them, make sure that they have the competencies, but you want to be hiring people who are not like you. My accountant, the woman who is my controller, is nothing like my personality at all. Nothing. The head of my production division, very brass tacks, get down to it. You know, I had dinner with her and her husband, but those are very flat conversations. My marketing people, oh man, I love those guys. Let's go have a drink. As fast as the personality, you want to make sure you find the right person and the right fit for that position. And a lot of times we're just like, hey, that guy reminds me of me. And that sucks. You need people who are ideally better than you.
That's the diversity in life. I appreciate your time today. We're running out of time because there's a whole bunch of other things to touch base on. We can always do another podcast.
Sure.
But more importantly, how can folks reach you? Either they want to get that sagely advice or they need your services. How do they get a hold of you?
Sure. I'm really excited that within the next few months, maybe by the time this podcast drops, I will have my website, gregward.com, GREGWARD.com. Not built yet, so if you go there, it's not available. It's a work in progress. And then, of course, Attorney Greg Ward on Instagram and LinkedIn, Gregory Ward, Attorney Greg Ward, you'll see me pop up. And you can follow me there. I put some content out on Instagram and LinkedIn, but the website's going to be the place. And we're going to be coming up with hopefully some better content and maybe even some classes about growing and scaling a business. As I said at the beginning, business is a spiritual game. I think there's a spiritual code that you need to live by. And I would attribute my success to a spiritual code that I've lived by and that kind of came on me through discovery, evolution in my journey. And I think that's important for people to know what that is, because maybe it'll help them overcome some of the hurdles in their life and some of the obstacles that they're going to face.
Excellent. I want to say thank you to Greg Ward, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. So if you want to learn how to scale, or you have insurance issues that you need to resolve, get a hold of Greg. To reach us, it's at info@creativeinsight.com. Wayne, how can folks reach you, sir?
That's where it's my website, motivateyou.ca, MOTIVE, the numeral 8, the letter U.ca.
If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.